Is Eragon worth reading? Well, let's talk about it. One boy, one dragon, a world of adventure. When Eragon finds a polished blue stone in the forest, he thinks it is the lucky discovery of a poor farm boy. Perhaps it will buy his family meat for the winter. But when the stone brings a dragon hatchling, Eragon soon realizes he has stumbled upon a legacy nearly as old as the Empire itself. Overnight, his simple life is shattered, and he is thrust into a perilous new world of destiny, magic, and power. With only an ancient sword and the advice of an old storyteller for guidance, Aragon and the fledgling dragon must navigate the dangerous terrain and dark enemies of an empire ruled by a king whose evil knows no bounds. Can Aragon take up the mantle of the legendary dragon riders? The fate of the empire may rest in his hands. So, Aragon, this book, we're not talking about the movie today, but the actual book in the series of four with all the dragons on the covers. We're just going to run through the characters in the book and kind of branch off from there to see if this book is actually worth reading. So let's begin with the main character, Aragon. Starts off as a poor farm boy, pretty naive, but knows his way around the mountains near his hometown. And you get hooked pretty early on in the book with what's going on with this mysterious blue dragon egg, and then Aragon stumbles upon it, and things happen here and there. And Aragon just starts his journey and really begins to grow from there. And I'm going to try to stay away from spoilers just in case you do want to read this. So Aragon starts in a really good spot as a main character and just opens you up to this massive world that you find yourself in. And there are a lot of comparisons, I think, to Lord of the Rings and even Star Wars in some aspects when we're talking about like the Empire versus the Rebels or the Varden that we'll talk about later on. So I really like Aragon. I really like how they handle his character, especially in this first book. So mad props to Aragon, the main character. And then we have Roran, his cousin, who's basically like his brother, since there's a lot of mystery surrounding Aragon's family, specifically his parents. But Roran gets a lot more precedence in the second book, Eldest, but in this first book, there's still a really good brotherly dynamic there where Roran's trying to marry Katrina in their hometown, and there's kind of some stuff going on there that's straining Aragon's relationship with him. And there's just this constant back and forth that I feel like the author covers really well and gets you invested. Then you have Garrow, which is Roran's dad or Aragon's uncle, who's basically his pseudo father. And Garrow's great for the short time that he's there. You really like him, and you like this kind of broken but happy family. And Yeah, so there are some things with Garrow that we'll touch on later, but then we also have Arya, who's the main elf in the book, and the book actually opens with her and the dragon egg in the forest running away from the bad guys, and her character is very intriguing to me. She's a very strong female presence in the book, and I really like her dynamic with Aragon, and I really like what the author does there and how it sometimes teases things, but also completely shuts down other things. And I really like how that progresses throughout. Then we've got Durza, who's this shade, who's basically a human possessed by evil spirits, which gives him a lot of power, but really corrupts him in his humanity. So he's basically like an evil sorcerer, and just a very terrifying presence. A very respectable villain is what I would call him. So he's not the main villain, as that is the King Galbatorix, but as far as in this first book, he really is your main threat that we're going up against. And whenever he's on screen or whenever you're reading about him in the book, you can definitely feel like a little bit of fear, like, oh gosh, something is about to go down. So I really like how that character is fleshed out and how you respect him and you feel how evil he is. Then we've got Brahm, the old storyteller in Carvajal or Palancar Valley, the hometown that you're starting out in. And there's just a lot of mystery and intrigue with his character. He's always talking about the dragon riders. He's always talking about these stories of old that are basically banned or outlawed by the soldiers and the empire today. And his dynamic with Aragon is fantastic. So Aragon actually stumbles upon the egg that was mentioned on the back of the book there that we opened this video with, and Brahm kind of guides him, takes him under his wing, and gives the knowledge that he has about dragons to kind of help Eragon with this quest that he goes on. And whatever, we'll just go in. So very early on in the book, spoiler alert, somebody does die that is close to Eragon, and that's gonna give Eragon this almost revenge tour or revenge storyline of I need to avenge this person. And now he has a dragon, so maybe he'll be able to do that, but he's still young, he's still naive, he doesn't know what to do with all that power that he's gotten. But Brahm is there to help kind of focus that, and just a whole lot going on there, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. But as far as the other residents of Carvajal, that starting town that you're in with Aragon, you've got Sloane and Horst. You've got like the blacksmith, and there's some good storylines there as well. Especially when stuff goes down, when everything starts going wrong in the town, you definitely see these personalities come to a head. And Sloane, the butcher, really despises Eragon and Roran and just that family in particular. Something bad happened to Sloane's wife, and then Katrina, who I mentioned with Roran earlier, that kind of relationship. Sloane definitely doesn't approve because he just does not like Eragon's family. And there's just a whole thing there, but you can definitely feel who Sloane is in the book. It's fleshed out really nicely of just he is a just bitter older man that will do anything to protect his daughter, but it's almost like overbearing, but it's palpable. You can feel it, which I just really like about most of these characters is they feel well realized and tangible, like you're there with them and you care about them, or you don't like the characters that you're not supposed to like. So the author did a really good job with that. For the Razak, these guys are like the king's henchmen. I always compare them to the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings. It's not a perfect comparison, but they're dark, cloaked figures that are very scary and menacing. And I just absolutely adore the fear and the presence that they have when you're reading about them. Like when they end up showing up in Carvajal, the starting town, and there is a scene where Eragon is like running in between the buildings in the alleyways, and he sees them and they're interrogating another town member, and they're like hissing. They're not even like human. There's a whole lot of description in them, but you know they're scary, and you know nothing good is coming from them being there, and they're trying to get information about the dragon egg and like what's going on. And Eragon overhears this and sees them and gets a glimpse of them under their hood, and it's just terrifying. And he sprints off, and they run him down. And this is just playing out in the book, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy!" And then he runs into Brahm, and Brahm is able to scare them away as they didn't want to be. They wanted to go undetected. So that scene is so good. Later on, there's a scene where they show up in a church, almost like a cathedral in one of the Empire's towns or cities. And again, you can just feel them creeping and crawling on the screen, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is not good. We got to get out of here. So I really, really like the Razak. And in the movies, it did not translate very well, as most things don't. We'll have to do another video on the movies, but on the movie, but really like the Razak, and they are also the ones responsible for that close death to Eragon. So he's running after them to get revenge, even though they're way more advanced in like weaponry and combat than he is. So it's just this complete underdog story, but you're there for it and you want to see more. So as far as the main villain, Galbatorix, he's kind of like, if you've seen Naruto, he's kind of like the Madara. He's the top dog. He's the big guy that everyone talks about, and he should be feared. And he's the big baddie that did all of this to the Dragon Riders, and he betrayed everyone, and he's got complete control, and he's constantly getting stronger, and we got to watch out for him. But as far as in the first book, you really don't get much on him other than people talking about him and how stuff went down. So it's really interesting, but what we can tell from this is that Durza answers to Galbatorix, the Shade from earlier, as well as the Razak, the two creepy guys. So they both report to Galbatorix, so you're getting a lot of street cred from there. You're getting a lot of, okay, this guy is not to be messed with, but he's also the big baddie, so how can we take him down? Then you have the Urgles. They're kind of like brutes. In later books, there's different kinds of Urgles that are more like big rammed figures, big rams. And so I like to think of them as just kind of these brutish figures who don't have a lot of humanity either. But there's actually a lot more nuance to that in the later books, but we will save that for a different day. But that's just kind of another, it's kind of like orcs from like World of Warcraft or other like fantasy novels. So instead of orcs, we have Urgles, and or even like brutes from Halo. I don't know, but we got the Urgles, and they're under the control of King Galbatorix, and they kind of carry out his will along with his normal human soldiers as well. So he definitely has a lot of firepower. Then we have dragons and the dragon eggs. So at this time in the first book, there's not a lot of dragons left. There's really, I think, just a handful that we even know of, but there is this dragon egg that Arya the elf had. Now, maybe she wasn't the one that stole it per se, but she was the one transporting it to try to get it to the good guys when she got ambushed at the very beginning of the book. So we still have the eggs, and then the thing with the dragon and the human connection is the dragon egg will hatch for whichever human it sees fit. So we do have that going. So Arya is here to save the egg, and it does end up hatching for Eragon, our main character. So then you have the dragon riders in general. These can be humans, they can be elves. It really just depends who the dragon chooses. And then you have a mental link and connection with that dragon. So for Eragon and Saphira, the blue dragon that will hatch for him, they can actually read each other's thoughts and even talk to each other telepathically. And it's just like there's two people in one brain, and you basically become one over the course of the book, which is really cool. So then you have Geod, Angela, and Solumbum. So on our journey out of the main town, we run into one of Brom's old associates named Geod, who's now kind of in the trading merchant industry. But he was also part of the Varden or the resistance group with Brom, and there's a lot there, and I really like his character. And then we have Angela and Solumbum. Angela's kind of like this witch, and she's really good with herbs, and she's very kooky, she's very crazy, but she also tells fortunes and tells the future. And we do get a glimpse into Eragon's life when he goes to talk to Angela, that someone close to him will die. That's right, another person close to him will die, and you don't know who it is. But the funny part is Angela knows the person, and there's just so many breadcrumbs with that, where she's like, you know, this is gonna happen, and you're like, huh. It just in passing, you're like, okay, that doesn't mean much. But then when the author cashes in on it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And then Solumbum, the Weircat, is just a very intriguing character to me. I really like his dynamic with Saphira moving on. So you've got this Weircat and a dragon, and they just kind of jab back and forth. And I like how Eragon kind of gets sandwiched and a little bit jealous of if Solumbum's giving Saphira too much attention or vice versa. There's just a fun little dynamic there. Then you have the Worshippers of Helgrind, and you do get a lot more of this later on in, I think, the third book. But it's just a creepy, culty worshiping place, and you can just feel it. It's not a great place you want to be, and it goes back to what I said earlier about the Razak and the cathedral when they show up to ambush Eragon. It's just like you can just feel where you are, and if you're supposed to be excited in the scene, you're excited, and if you're like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen here, then you're just left with that. It's like the author does a great job of getting you to feel the exact way that he wanted you to feel, or at least it feels like that. And you've also got Drasleona, another one of the big empire cities that Eragon and Brom travel to. Another little tidbit we have here is magic in general in the ancient language. There's this whole, you can use magic to heal, to hurt people, to do like 720 no scopes with the bow and arrow. Like you can use magic for basically anything, but it does use up your energy. So it's, you got to be careful with that. And then the better you are with pronouncing things in the ancient language, the more creative you can get with doing different spells and such. So really, the stronger the Eragon becomes, the more applicable it is to use spells and different kinds of sorcery and such like that. So then we have Murtagh, one of my favorite characters, especially in the first book. He is such a mysterious, kind of broken character. Again, another allusion to Naruto is he's like Sasuke. He's just so conflicted, and he's just getting tugged from so many different directions. But there's one scene in particular towards the end where he's getting his mind infiltrated, and he tells them that they're not allowed to go in his mind as it's the only thing that he has left. And it just hits so hard after having so many different chapters with him and his interactions with Eragon in the group. Then There is a massive character death. The prophecy comes true from Angela, and it's pretty crazy. It just cashes in so hard. This is about like halfway through the book, and you're just like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way this happens. And then the implications that it has in the future books as well, you can just feel it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then you also get the Varden, who are very similar to the rebels in Star Wars, as they are rebelling or resisting the Empire and its far-reaching power. And just very easy to root for them. And I like how Eragon is kind of like, okay, I need to fight with you guys, I need to fight for you guys, but also like, what is this? What does all of this entail? Are there strings attached? You know, what's going on with Murtagh? And everything there. We also have Eragon and Arya, that dynamic. So you have the main character, he's, you know, your main guy, he's turning into a stud, and then you have the main girl elf here, and you're like, okay, maybe this should be a romance, maybe this should be a relationship. But I absolutely love what the author does here, and he's like, dude, just because you're a dragon rider, just because you think you're a stud, doesn't mean you're gonna get the main girl. And it's so good, and Eragon is just swooning. He is absolutely smitten by Arya, and it's just oddly satisfying for the main guy not to get her right off. At least I won't spoil anything for later on down the road, but like, I really like how he handles that, of just like, yes, you know, and it gets to the point where you're almost like, hey, maybe Aragon has a case, you know, maybe they could make this work, maybe he does deserve her. And Arya's just like, no, I'm good. And it's just very satisfying. Then you've got the twins, these two bald-headed buffoons that work with the Varden. They're always up to something, and these are the guys that are going to try to probe Murtagh's brain, his mind, and I just really don't like them, and the author does a great job of evoking that emotion. And then lastly, we have the dwarves and Ajihad. So the Varden are kind of hanging out with the dwarves. So you've got your humans, your dwarves, your elves, and just the whole Lord of the Rings line up there, the whole fantasy genre coming out to play. And I always am more invested in the elves than I am the dwarves, but they're still handled really well. And I like how the Varden is made up of people and the dwarves and that whole dynamic there. And then Ajihad is the leader of the Varden, and he's great. And just a strong male presence, and he also has a daughter in the Varden as well, and we get more on that later. But it's really cool to see Aragon's dynamic with all of these different characters, and kind of like where he starts, where he builds and grows, and then where he ends up from there. So full circle, I think this book has a little bit of everything. It's got a lot of action, it's got a lot of suspense, it's got a lot of mystery, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it's very easy to read. It's right around 500 pages, so it's not too long, but it's definitely not the shortest. But once it gets going, I have heard some people complain that the first 100 pages is too slow. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think it really does get you hooked and invested, and then from there it's over. Like, it just takes you, and there's no going back. So I really enjoy the breadcrumbs of, oh my gosh, what's that? And then the cashing in on those things later is just super satisfying. So in conclusion, is Eragon worth reading? I would absolutely say yes. I know everybody is super busy. It's 2023 now, and we are go, go, go. There is an audiobook on Audible of this, and it was also really good, so you can do that in your spare time. But as far as the actual physical book, I think it's a great time, and there's just a lot to be had here. So I give it a huge thumbs up, and I definitely think it is worth reading. As always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I will catch you on the flip. Peace.